Thank you for coming on this beautiful day. Of course, we're here to support Charneil, and I thank you for coming out to support him for his campaign. I wanted to talk about just my feeling about this campaign. I am honored that he picked me to be his campaign manager, and I just can't wait to go through this journey. As someone who was born and raised in Waterbury, I know that there should be some change. I have seen the good side of it and a lot of bad, and it's definitely time for us to move forward, and Charneil is the best person, in my opinion, to do this. Today, we actually have two really great speakers who worked very closely with Charneil. We have Bilal Tajuddin and Razan Sotero. I said her name wrong. Bilal Tajuddin is a resident of Waterbury and the East End, and a queer community and political organizer. And then Razan Sotero is a Latinx proud organizer who also is a resident of Waterbury, and she is a leader and advocate. She runs the Waterbury Empowers People to Act WEPA. Both are close friends, and they want to share their view of this campaign and also their experience with Charneil. So I will lead off and hand the mic to Razan.
Woo! Yeah, Roslyn.
Y'all can hear me?
Nope. No, don't do it. Don't do it now.
Hello? Can y'all hear me?
Yep.
All right, that's what we're going to do. So, good afternoon, everyone. As Celeste said, my name is Razan Sotero. Razan is fine. I am the co-founder of Waterbury Empowers the People to Act, also known as WEPA. Together, we are a collective of Latina organizers, professionals, educators, and residents committed to advancing an anti-racist policy at the local and state level. I am truly honored to speak to you today, not only on behalf of WEPA, but as a Boricua resident of Waterbury who is excited to support this candidate and campaign for state senator. Since its inception in 2020, WEPA has made our concerns very clear. For too long, Waterbury, in particular communities of color, have been actively disengaged by elected officials who care more about maintaining the status quo than advancing meaningful, progressive, and effective policies that truly tackle systemic inequities. For too long, elected Democrats have weaponized and reduced constituent calls for true representation to a superficial flaunt of identity politics rather than a politic grounded in values of equity and justice. For too long, our representatives have exacerbated historical divides between marginalized communities rather than reckon with difficult truths and leverage points of commonality to move us forward. I am convinced that Charneil Bush can be the voice we need, and I trust his commitment to shaping policy that reflects both the immediate needs and the long-term visions of our communities. In both his professional and personal capacities, I have witnessed him time and time again speak truth to power, and I know his voice will only boom louder as state senator. Charneil, you have our fullest support and respect. And now, before we get to the main attraction, I am very honored to pass the mic to another pillar of our community, previous candidate for 5th District Alderman, Bilal Tajuddin.
I can yell. Are we good?
Yeah.
All right. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Razan, thank you for the generous introduction. I'm honored and humbled to be here in community with everyone today and to show my unequivocal support for Charneil to be our next state senator for the 15th district. I first met Charneil in 2016 after I helped to co-found, along with Roslyn and Maybeth here in the audience, the loose connection of queer people and our allies in Waterbury to create the first, as far as we could tell, queer organizing group dedicated to serving young people and advocating for a more holistic and supportive school district. Our major wins included getting the city's first specifically named LGBTQ youth support services at Waterbury Youth Services, and getting the Waterbury Public School District to begin considering comprehensive sex education, which they did in small pilot test runs. But as often is the case with organizing, wins make us comfortable. They give us the illusion that now is the time for rest. And because so many of us at the time were experienced organizers, but not experienced movement builders, we rested. I bring that up because after a few months worth of meeting, Charneil stopped showing up to those. And after he'd missed a few, I called to check in with him, to encourage him to come back. And he said no. And I'll never forget that while I thought we were so busy congratulating ourselves and doing the work, Charneil said, there's too much that still needs to be done for me to sit in those meetings without doing anything. He may have come back from time to time, but only when there is an opportunity for, as Charneil calls it, laboring together. This is why it came as no real surprise to me when Charneil called me in 2020 to say, hey, I'm thinking of running for office. To which I responded, what a coincidence. I too am thinking of running for office. Little did I realize that that would be the start of Charneil and I laboring together. But I invited him to join some planning calls for a group of progressive Waterburyans, a collection of folks across ages, races, genders, and sexualities, dedicated to being the collective holders and sharers of a new vision for Waterbury. With the support of so many, including Charneil as my campaign treasurer and trusted confidant who was with me throughout every step of the way, I launched the second primary for the Board of Alder this past September, a win for Charneil as much as a win for me. We fought against the most pervasive enemy Waterbury has, political apathy. While I ultimately did not make it past the primaries, this right here, that we are gathered today to show support for Charneil in this landmark campaign to labor together once more, is the difference between organizing and movement building. I've said it before and I'll say it again, that it's time for Waterbury to do more and to do better. And the clock ticks on and the hour is now for Charneil. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to him to tell you all why we're here today.
Oh man, I gotta get my words here. All right. Well, hello everybody. Thank you for coming. I always start off every speech or anything that I give by telling everybody I grew up in the church. I'm an old Kojic church boy with, hard pews and hardwood floors, so I need y'all to talk back to me when we do this here, right? So when I say good afternoon, hello everybody, y'all gotta say something back to me. Let's do it.
Good afternoon.
I love it. All right, so don't get me started, right? So thank you so much for coming. I recognize that it's a Saturday afternoon and it's actually really beautiful out. And y'all could have been anywhere today, but you are here with me, and that means an awful, awful lot. I'm humbled, a little anxiety-ridden by all of you here, but I'm excited to be here today, and I can't say that I expected to be here today. For most of my life, my friends have heckled me, saying, you're either going to be a politician or you're going to be a pastor. And I've always laughed it off, but today, I guess I can't do that anymore. And I don't want to do it anymore. I like to think that I'm a decent speech giver, but I like to think I'm a better storyteller. So if you guys don't mind, I'm going to do a little bit of both today. Even if you did mind, we're here already, right? So I want to go back. So in this process, I sat down with several folks who are politically connected, and they asked, well, when was the first time you wanted to get into politics? And I had to think hard. And the first time was in 2000, actually, yeah. And, it was 2001, and I had won a statewide essay contest for Black History Month. And it was a big deal for me because I love to read and write mostly so I can learn vocabulary to make fun of my sister. And she wouldn't understand what I was talking about, but she knew to be offended, right? And so we won this, and it was big. We went to the first cathedral in Bloomfield, and it was a beautiful ceremony. There was a reception with words I said hors d'oeuvres, and it was hors d'oeuvres. I thought it was fancy. I was 11 years old. But it was exciting, and I was really proud. And I was so excited that the News Times, the Waterbury newspaper, was going to write an article about me winning this contest. And I was like, yeah, well, let's do this. So it came to my school, I got dressed up, I posed. And I remember reading this article, and in that article, I was quoted as saying that I wanted to be president, and not just president, the first Black president. And I didn't know that 7 years later I'd have the opportunity to vote for the first Black president. But it wasn't because I wanted to ascend to the mountaintop. It wasn't for status. The next part of that quote was because I wanted to make it better for people who are poor. At 11 years old, I had that thought process. It lets me know that two things. I recognize the power of elected office, and the influence it has on the people that they're supposed to serve. And two, that poor people can't escape poverty if the policies and systems around them don't work for them. You may think that it's pretty complex for a preteen to think like this, but to do that, we have to get back in the time machine and go back to my earlier years. I think that when you're talking about your now, you have to know your then. And so we're going to do that right now. So I grew up in Danbury, Connecticut. I was in the Laurel Garden housing projects. There's 6 of us in a 2-bedroom apartment. And I say this because growing up in that community was my first introduction to what community should look like. You know, we all recognized that we needed each other. I still remember knocking on doors, asking to borrow eggs. You're never giving them back, or flour, or sugar, you know, anything that you needed to cook a meal. I remember my mom having these sudden sleepovers with random kids in the neighborhood because parents had to work late or they couldn't come home. You know? And even in that shared struggle, you know, I recognize what a lot of days look like behind the door of D6 where we live. I remember boiling water on the stove for a bath because, you know what I'm talking about, because our gas was turned off, or leaving the oven open for heat and sleeping in the living room so that way we could catch some of that warmth. I remember having to constantly throw out my favorite cereals because Cocoa Puffs shouldn't have legs, right? And all of this, like, looming over the situation was my mother's battle with addiction and her mental health. And at some point it had gotten so bad that a neighbor had called the Department of Children and Families, DCF as we know them, and we were assigned Shelly, who was a very, very fresh college graduate, and she was our new social worker, and she was present and willing to go above and beyond to try to help us. She didn't understand the red lines of DCF, so she constantly stepped over them. We still speak to this day. We went out for my birthday. You know, that's the kind of friendship that we had built together. And she had stopped by in our neighborhood because she was around the corner, and that's the kind of woman that Shelly is. And when she did, she discovered that the woman, the friend of my mother's that was asleep on her couch, wasn't actually asleep, but that she had overdosed. And she recognized that this is no longer a safe place for me and my sister. And ever since then, everything became a whirlwind. My sister and I got swept up. We were living out of duffel bags, bouncing from cousin's house to cousin's houses, until we were separated for the first time in our lives. My sister stayed with a cousin, and I ended up in a group home. Sorry.
Take your time now.
Got it.
Take your time.
I just realized I don't have my sister today.
Take your time.
But I ended up in a group home with other kids around my age that were also going through some of the worst times of their life. And while we all had varying circumstances, there was one thread between all of the 10 kids in the house. We had tons of conversations. We didn't always have the words to use. I did. But we didn't always have the words to use. But we had decided, like, we all were poor. And so from the projects to the group home, my brain had linked all of these things in poverty. So fast forward to my aunt becoming my foster parent, and we to the south end of Waterbury in 2000. Fast forward to me writing that essay and that article being written. And when I think back to that article, I think about the first line of that article. It's just 3 words: Charneil dreams big. It was true then, and I'm here to tell you that it's true now, 20 years later. I've always had dreams so big they scared me and hopes so high that I could, if I looked down, I'd get dizzy. For most of my life, I've been a person of faith, so I'm gonna take you to church for a little bit. My favorite Bible verse is Ephesians 3:20, but unto him who is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we can ask or think. And so for as long as I can remember, I have always tried to think as big as possible and out of the box as possible, because I believe that God would always take it just a step further than that. I want so much for myself, and the hope that it gives me is something I want for the people I love. I want it for my neighbors, my community, and I want it for everyone. I believe that we have to dream and think big to bring about the changes that we hope to see in our community. If we want to see our unhoused and unsheltered neighbors sleeping safely under a roof, protected from the elements, we have to think bigger than one viable shelter in Waterbury. If we want to see them have access to comprehensive services that get them back to self-sufficiency, we have to think bigger than a faulty 211 number for support. If we want to see people in our community have affordable, safe, and dignified housing, we have to dream beyond courting neglectful out-of-state landlords to provide it to our residents.
Let's go.
If we want to see our youth correct their paths after they've made poor decisions, we have to think bigger than throwing our children in prison.
Come on.
We are allowed to want better for ourselves and for the community that we love. The problem is that our elected officials' dreams are not as big as ours. So many of them seem unmoved by the struggles that face so many of our families and are unconcerned with solutions. When so many of our families are barely making it every month, our state senator has voted against things like a fair work week and raising the minimum wage. When it came to giving people the opportunity to lift themselves out of poverty, her answer was no. She voted against sick leave. When so many people go to work ill because missing work means an unpaid bill or a missed meal. She didn't think that low-income and working families deserved that. For the people that were worried about what life would look like for them financially if they had a long unpaid recovery from a surgery or illness, or if they took time off to bond with new additions to their families, she voted no on family and medical leave. No one should be forced to choose between advancing in their careers and growing their family. And when her constituents were blocking I-84 and marching all over Waterbury in a demand for justice and systemic change in the wake of George Floyd's murder, she voted no on police accountability. When given the opportunity to protect people from discrimination based on gender expression, she voted no. When our trans brothers and sisters are at higher risk of things like unemployment, homelessness, suicide, and violence, she didn't think they needed protection from the people in the systems that would do them harm. As a person that has sat in eviction hearings with their friends and loved ones as a support and advocate, I was furious when she voted against providing attorneys for people facing evictions. Why not make sure that the residents of your district know what resources are available to them in their rights as tenants? As a person that believes women should have agency over their own bodies, I think they should have all the accurate and relevant information around pregnancy and birth. Our state senator voted no on a bill that would keep faith-based pregnancy centers from using deceptive advertising. That is dangerous disregard for the need of her constituents. She has done all of this without having to explain herself to the residents of this district. She has never had to be clear in her stances and has never honestly been asked about her views. This past election cycle, she didn't even have a campaign site to serve as an introduction to new voters. And when she won, not so much as a thank you was posted on her social media pages. She feels that almost after 40 years at the Capitol, that I feel that she's grown complacent. This isn't leadership. We are at a crucial point in our lifetimes where things are moving so quickly and more people are being left behind, and I'm not okay with that. And I'm sure that you aren't either. It's clear that we can't rely on our elected officials to do what's in our best interest. If we want to see radical and transformative change in our community, it's up to us to bring it about. No longer are we asking politely to be heard and yes, no longer are we asking politely to be heard by those charged with representing us. We are demanding our space, and that we are demanding our seat at the table back. Our community deserves a true choice in who carries our voices to the halls of the Capitol, which brings us to today. I'm asking the people of the 15th District that I be that choice. If you want a state senator that has lived the life that you have lived, that understand what it's like to work hard and feel like you can never quite get there, I know what it's like. I know what it's like to go hungry, to stress about bills that will and won't get paid. I've worked 2 to 3 jobs just to make ends meet. I've walked with my friends and loved ones through their drug addictions and lost some of the most important people to me because of it. Hell, I'm a former foster kid turned single foster parent, right? At my job every day, I sit across from parents and students who have high hopes and concerns about getting there because the way the world looks right now. Some have even decided that there's no point in even trying to get out. So believe me when I say to you that I see you, I hear you, I understand you. And just like I've been fighting all my life, I will fight for you. I promise to be an empathetic, compassionate, forward-thinking leader that will be accessible and accountable to you and only you. And I also recognize that I won't be sent to Hartford with an agenda or the intention of being an independent voice, but that it'd be my duty to bring all of your voices, your hopes, and yes, your dreams with me. So here I am, asking you again for your trust, your time, all of your energy, and indeed your money to make sure that this progress that we talk about can finally make its way to the 15th District, to make sure that our youth and our families are given a fighting chance at building pathways to success. I'm ready to put to work in. It's up to us. Thank you.
Yes.